This week, I decided to read 1177 BC by Eric Klein, a famous historian, like a full-on, like this is real history now, not historical fiction. His crap can end up in textbooks and whatnot. So, the book is 1177, the year civilization collapsed. It's got a wicked cover. And that's sort of the root problem with the book. I own it. I bought it on sale. I own it. I didn't want it. I got it on his reputation alone. I didn't really look at the reviews or anything. I'm going to give it a 2 out of 5. Now, hold on. Here's why. It's a little misleading in the title. So, if this isn't... I've read histories like a Herodotus or a Thomas Carlyle, where there's more personality in it. So, if you're a historian and you go and you learn all of the things, you can come and sit down and write a book and not have to constantly fight in your mind that we don't think you're an expert, right? Some people are going to challenge any expertise, whatever that is, and you just put it at the back of the book, like this is all the stuff, right? But you don't have to let your own research, I don't need to see how the sausage is made. I just want to eat cooked sausage. And that's sort of his problem. Other people can, and I wouldn't be on him so hard if I hadn't read these other ones that do so much better of a job. More the story. You don't have to be so rigid as a historian. You can tell me what you think. You can go with it. And still be in line and still be accurate. Right? So if you're talking about Egyptians, you can say, they had these reed boats and they float down the river and this and that. You don't have to go, here's where I found a reed boat. Here's where I learned how to make one. Here's where I saw it on some tomb or something every 5 minutes. Right? This is what he does. He's real stuck in the weeds, so to speak. And so this isn't the year civilization collapsed, this great, exciting sort of year. This is, who is this for? This is, if you watched Indiana Jones and you said, I like that movie, but if it had less action in it and more of him digging in the dirt, then it'd be perfect, right? If you watched Time Team, the British show, right, where my homeboy is trying to dig up an entire crashed plane with his little spackle, right? Then this is the book for you, because this is more of an archaeologist book than here's the history of these events, right? As a reader, I want to be carried through those events, those times. I want to be in ancient Egypt. I want to be in ancient Canaan, etc., etc. Right? He doesn't take you there because the book isn't there. The book is here. We talk a lot more about archaeologists. This one's theory, and then that one's opposite theory. This kind of thing. It's very much an archaeologist book. So I think if you know that going in, right? Because some of what hurt this book, I think, is my expectation of it. Which, it came from the cover. It's not like I did it. I didn't just make up what I wanted this book to be. So if you go in knowing it's an archaeologist book, I think you'll be much happier. Having said that, I still like it. Once I knew what it was hard to shake waiting for that. Here's the fire and brimstone. But it never really shows up. But it's still wonderfully informative. So, let me get into some of the book. He says because the old history, somewhere written on some ancient Egyptian wall, says this, the sea kings, the sea peoples came and wrought some of this destruction. And he's like, the sea peoples could have originated from Sardinia, Sicily, Italy, the Aegean, Anatolia. And I'm like, yeah, those are all places on Earth. I'm sure they came from Earth. Right? He won't definitively say, of course, because we don't definitively know. But I'm like, you're the expert. I'm not. You know, you can tell me. You can tell me, and then some other expert can tell me what he thinks. And then when I read 5 of these books, my mind can go, all these places could have been, and I can form my own opinion. But he didn't do that. He really wants to say, just, what is it? The Real Housewives show, right? You know when they do their end of year review, and it's all the ladies sitting there, and this one says this, and then that one says that. Some of the book is that, but for, you know, real nerdy archaeologists. So it's not like we're stabbing each other or pulling hair out. But he'll say, like, this archaeologist says this, and he gives the theory, and then it's like that one says the exact opposite. And you're like, ooh, we're going to have some friction here, right? This is the energy that comes from this book. But he doesn't want, he's the Cohen guy. He doesn't want to say one or the other. He doesn't want to say. A little disappointing. I mean, it's a little disappointing. This map, now, I listened to this book, so I don't know if the print version has maps. But maps would be definitely usable here. Okay? Unless you already know. You know, unless you already know that Canaan's in modern Lebanon, or where the Hittites are. I think it's modern Turkey. Assyrians. You know where Babylon is. You know where Manoah is. Right? What's that other place? Megiddo. Hatsori. You know, I mean, do you know these places by name? Because he does, and he assumes everyone else does. Because again, I think his audience is supposed to be a bunch of archaeologists. But that crap gets real hard to track in your mind. Now, I suppose if you had maps, it'd be a lot easier. Because we're talking about people movements. And I can imagine, yeah, something happened there in that part of Greece. And they funneled down. And there's the Mediterranean. And you sail across. And there's Egypt. And you just get after it. I can start to imagine this kind of happening. But again, as just in its written form, he does nothing to build that world for you. You have no vision in your mind other than what you bring of what Egypt looks like, of what Assyria looks like, the feel, what it's like to be in one of these cities, what it's like to be outside of them, what their armies, what would it be like to be in the army, on the march, a commander, you know, all these kind of questions I have. He doesn't fill it out. The Minoans had contact with Egypt, right? What he wants to get the point across is that around the Mediterranean, especially down, I guess, in the Africa side, I guess from Turkey down that way, we have a lot of interconnected commerce that gets disrupted by wars, and then an establishment is upended and no longer exists. But rather than just sort of say that and then move on or tell me in the trenches what that means, he'll give like 10,000 examples of pottery that they found, of painting styles, of building styles, of bricks that must have come from here and there, of old clay tablet receipts that said I got your onyx and your stone and your this and your that, to prove everything that he's saying. And I'm like, bro, I get it. I trust you. You know, you can say they were in contact. I'm not going to challenge that. If someone does, you know you got the facts. Put them in the back. He won't put them in the back. You do want him to just go with it. But these groups, And again, he lays facts out, and then your mind just races. You go, Egypt. I'm like, Egypt may be 1,000, 2,000 years old by this point in time in history we're talking about. It's the big boy in town. It's like ye old United States. It's just running everything. But I'm sitting here thinking, like, the United States is only 250 years old, and I feel like a lot's happened. So I can't imagine what would it be like for not just Egypt, but for all the lands around Egypt to have this one constant. Just, Egypt is always just there. What that does to your mindset, right? So Egypt's there for like 1,000, 2,000 years. Assyria's there for like 1,000 or 2,000 years. Babylon, the Hittites up in Turkey. You get all these groups, the main ones. Now, there are little battles around on the edges. I guess from Turkey coming down. Egypt from below, Namibia, this situation. But this band of them exists knowing each other. I'm like, the king of Egypt constantly talking to the king of Assyria for 1,000 years. There's ups and downs, but the thing's never left. Of course they're going to have, you know what, your wheat grows faster. I'll just give you gold and these rocks for that wheat. These deeply entrenched codependencies, right? I get slaves from you, you get cows from me, we get pigs from him, etc., etc. So that when a sea peoples, which I think may have been Greek or maybe Spanish, I'm trying to, in my mind, imagine who would have boats, because, Spain and Portugal, years and years later, end up with very nautical empires. They didn't try and go to Africa. They just went on the seas and found all these new lands. So I can imagine deep down in their roots, they have boats. The weather's always nice in sort of Spain. I could see you wanting to, puddle around out there. Wouldn't take you long to find Africa. Now, you might not always mess with them, but that Mediterranean just sits there, right? So I think the sea peoples were maybe Greek and Spanish. That's just me personally. But they came in and just started jacking people up, right? Now, he gives you all these examples of there may have been this inner turmoil, that inner kind of assassination attempts. I'm trying to take over the kingdom. All these little moments that can stack on you on top of some drought or whatever. But they come in, and now all of a sudden, this thing's upended. Now, I can also see these years, right? These thousands of years in existence also affecting you. If you attack a 200-year-old America, it's going to react much different than your 2,000-year-old China. They've seen it before. And a lot of times you might not, in the moment, take it as seriously as you should. I think I've read some Chinese history. I think it's when Japan invaded, where this army's moving in. And at first they're like, it's a thing, right? It's all up in Korea or whatever. But if it churns too deep, then China starts to, get kind of nervous. Now they have the space to be nervous, spaces to run and hide. They react, they win, they maintain, right? But in the back of your mind, if this thing's always been, and 1,000 years is a long time, to go, well, it's never going to go away. Egypt will just always be here. So that when this new attack comes, you don't see it as different, right? And I think part of that natural, hubris led to the eventual downfall. I think it's only natural. It's only natural to be around that long and then just sort of in your mind that assuredness. It's just, there's no way it can just go. It's always been, and then all of a sudden in a generation or two, Egypt's a memory and these are new people and we act a different way. I can understand that. Also, they make a point, he doesn't, I think he uses someone else's theory, where that interdependence, that we are friends, that I can talk eye to eye with you, but it's just king to king, right? That's the king and he runs everything. Well, when something happens to that king and his court, in say in Turkey, the Hittites, then this king has no one to talk to unless he sends a whole army, which ain't going to get there anytime quickly enough. And then everything's off kilter, right? None of the people below, everyone who was in the court is gone or dead, who has any kind of knowledge as to how to procure said cows and send them to said place so that these people can have beef, right? And it's that versus what we have now, which is countless merchants all over the place. You know, I think Rome sort of had this as well, where we just have random people growing cows and then you just send them to a market. And this guy's like, I'll be a market for cows. And the other guy's like, I'll be a market for cows and goats. We have competing multiple layers. No one's unified. They can group up and make a guild or a union and say, this is what we should do at cow prices. But there's no one in charge of all of them, right? Now the king then, or the government, will oversee the borders, and then everyone pays in to make sure it's safe, etc., etc. But then they didn't have that. We're way back in BC time. So it's just the king. And the king knows where to get this, and the king knows where to get that. And so when he dies, I'm just sitting here with my cow. No one came to get it. I guess I'll just eat it. I'm not going to starve. He eats his cow. They all eat their cows, and then no one in Turkey can eat any cow. Now they're starving, and now there's upheaval. Snowballs, right? That makes sense to me. I think that's a great theory. A bit of a side note, because it comes up, because we're in that part of the world. And to me, this is part of one of the more interesting parts of the book, is when the Israelites are mentioned. Now, if you are sensitive about your Bible, meaning if somebody's like, you know, Noah's Ark was never in this place that the Bible says it was, and you're like, I'll stab you in the face, right? Maybe not that extreme. I think you know what I mean. Some people don't want anything said anywhere that questions anything ever about their Bible. It's understandable. That's not what anyone here is trying to do. I don't think our author's trying to do that. But in the course of his writing, he will seem flippant or dismissive about the Bible. So know that going in if it's an issue for you. We have fun stories. There's one about Nefertiti's head, her little golden famous golden head. The Germans back in the day had a deal with the Egyptians. And however the deal worked, I think the Egyptians could pick what they wanted to keep, at least half of. So the Germans found this head. I think they knew what it was. They purposely left it dirty and chucked it at the back of the truck with all this other stuff. So that the Egyptians are coming by like, yeah, I want that, I want that. What is this ugly thing? Nah, you can have that dirty thing. I don't care. Right? Ship it to Germany, polish that bad boy up. It's just the most beautiful head ever. Now they're salty about it and like, I want it back. I'm like, Germans ain't giving you that crap back. I just thought that was funny. We have, again, you start mentioning Bible, Israelites. It's interesting to me. Just because in my mind, it's always been, there's always a religious slant to it. Even nowadays, when it's the Jew, the Palestinians attacking the Jews, or vice versa. You cannot start that argument without one of the sides mentioning, the Palestinians are like, we were here first. And the Jews were like, this is our biblical homeland for the last 4,000 years. They always bring this up, right? So it's this religious thing that sticks into the real world. I like to see it as a history, though. Just like if we could scrub that religious part off so that it doesn't inflame everyone. What actually happened with these people? That history I'm very interested in. So when he's saying, I think he said that the Trojan horse, I think I remember this right. Like the Trojan horse was happening at the same time as the Exodus out of Egypt, led by Moses. It just blows my mind for some reason. I don't know why. In my mind, I think all these things are just way far apart. Like there's not enough room in history for more than one of these things to happen at once. But it all happens at the same time. That's the fun of history. It's also what makes it hard to retell. Where do I start? Where do I end? Right? Which he doesn't really have that problem in this book. He really knows his subject matter. He tells me about various Troys. Somehow, I still don't know how this makes sense, but they're like, we found 7 Troys stacked on top of each other. I'm like, what do you mean there's 7 Troys? Whereas apparently one collapsed and they built on top of it, and then it collapsed and then they rebuilt it, and then it collapsed again, and then they rebuilt on top of it. I'm like, bro, what are y'all doing? It's getting goofy. But apparently, because I could never, they were like, okay, I've taken Troy, destroy it. I'm like, how do you destroy a bunch of brick buildings? Well, what I didn't know, of course, they're mud, a mud kind of brick, but inside they used a lot of wood. Wooden beams, wooden this, wooden that. So that when you lit it on fire, there's tons to burn. But then the brick outside just turned into like an oven. Right? So all these great buildings just became massive ovens and just went up in flames. And hot flame until the brick itself turned to like slag and would just melt down. And that's one of the techniques archaeologists use. They say, look, it was slag. That must have been a fire. Oh my. It's kind of trippy. It's kind of cool, but trippy. So we get, again, these Israelites. And there's a city called Megiddo, a Canaanite city called Megiddo. And he's talking about how on top of the sea peoples, that these Israelites show up on the scene and just start, attacking certain people for whatever reasons they had. And it added to the drought and added to the internal upheaval and added to the sea peoples and, collapsing the whole ecosystem that they had. But that they said that when the Israelites, that some people didn't think they attacked because they didn't see wholesale destruction. But then they did see, I guess, government buildings. The king's castle, this sort of government building here, but all the citizens were left alive. I thought that was interesting. I feel like it works, where some of it, they weren't looted, right? I think there's something in the Bible where they don't loot. Wherever city they take, they just destroy it and then leave. So that you flip it off of the Bible now, and you're talking about these people who were attacked. The Jews came and they attacked, and I'm like, oh my God, the capital got destroyed. But I'm still here. And the army didn't come and take all of my stuff. So we still have money. We still have food. We still have clothes. We rebuild in this place, or we regrow in a different way, right? Let's do a different type of government. All these things happen. In some of the spots, it's just flattened. Everyone leaves and comes back and tries to rebuild. And then in some of these cities, it's like flattened and no one comes back. And so he's trying to find all the various what fors and hows that happen throughout all of these. But I like these little tidbits of the Jews that pop up throughout this book, because he treats the Bible the same as he would treat, an Egyptian inscription on the wall. It's all clues to go by until I can find any kind of fact. But he won't give you his opinion, like I said. And that's the book. That's what ends up happening. This 1777 isn't a definitive year where this sort of amount of stuff happens. But it's a archaeological placeholder, right? Like a good way to say, like the Great Depression, like we can say it started the day the stock market fell. But it might have had some leeway here. That's what they use this date as, where it's an easy marker. But things had been decaying and then decayed a little more before it just sort of turned over and became a new thing. And that's this book. It's not dramatically long. It is still worth it. Again, because even not knowing all these places, facts are getting, pumped into your brain that come up later. That's the fun of history. So it is worth it. I might not buy it. Unless, again, like I said, if you're really into archaeology, you'll be fine with this book. But if not, just avoid it completely. You'll be fine. All right. Ads. All of my books are better than this one. Also, all of my books are completely made up. So I don't have the burden of facts whatsoever. A benefit. Okay, people. I won't hold you too long looking at my books and trying to subliminally bait you into buying them. You'll buy them or you won't. You'll enjoy them or you won't. I hope you enjoy them, if you do buy them. Okay, I will see you, lovely lot, next week.